I got into my husband's car and found a tube of personal lubricant in the glove compartment. I kept my face calm, slipped it into my purse, and in the laundry room swapped its contents for industrial superglue. I returned it to the same spot, cap smudged just so. Later, that quiet switch would set off panic on our street and a call to the fire department. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it's traveled. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cooling mug. The house held its breath with me. The silence in the house as thick as morning fog, a silence that had become a constant, unwelcome guest. The old clock on the wall, a wedding gift from my late mother, ticked with a relentless, accusatory rhythm. Each beat felt like a nudge toward truths I did not want. I stared at its slow hands, wondering when my life had drifted off course. Doubt gathered like storm clouds as he came home from yet another business dinner, not only tired but burdened, as if he carried the weight of a secret too heavy to bear. His face was a map of fatigue and guilt, lines etched around his eyes and mouth that had never been there before. He played the part of the overworked husband, tossing his jacket with a sigh. The performance continued with a tug at the tie, a practice show of strain. Then he sagged toward the bedroom and let himself fall, the old springs answering him, without even bothering to shower. The faint scent of his expensive cologne hung in the air, but it was mixed with a new alien fragrance, a sweet floral perfume that felt like an intrusion, a brazen confession from a life I didn't know he was living. A few minutes later, the steady rasp of his snoring spread through the rooms. Once it meant safety. Now it scraped at my nerves, a taunt I could not ignore, a lullaby for a fool. I got up, moving with the quiet, practiced grace of a wife of 40 years, and began to tidy up the mess he'd left in the living room, his jacket, his wallet, his cell phone, his old laptop. The phone screen still glowed, a single new email pulsing like a warning. I frowned and felt my chest tighten. Julian never used email. He always said, "Juliet, all this tech stuff is too complicated. I'd rather just make a call." But now, an email. It was right there in plain sight, daring me to look. Curiosity tinged with dread pushed me forward. I tapped it open and stared at the line that sliced me clean through. The message was short, a mere handful of words that would shatter my world. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." It was followed by a red heart, a symbol of affection that pierced my own heart with a cold, sharp ache. Heat rose to my face as if I had been slapped. The screen felt heavy in my palm, shining back a version of my life I did not recognize. Dad echoed in my skull, a bell I could not hush. I scrolled and searched, my thumb shaking, looking for more clues. But there was nothing. Just a strange email address, a jumble of meaningless characters that offered no answers, only more questions. The room felt drafty, though the windows were shut. Fear crept up my spine, not the shiver of a chill, but something older and deeper. It was like a hidden door cracking open in my own house, revealing a tunnel of secrets I never knew existed. I glanced at the bedroom and saw Julian turn over with a sputtering snore, his face still and peaceful, a stark and infuriating contrast to the storm raging inside me. My pulse thudded hard and guilty, as if I were the trespasser. I slid the phone back exactly as I found it, careful with every angle and smudge, though my hands shook so much I almost dropped it. I continued cleaning up, my movements now mechanical, robotic. I gathered his clothes, trying to breathe evenly, and carried them to the laundry. In one pocket, my fingers brushed a stiff fold. I unfolded a fresh receipt from a high-end steakhouse in San Antonio dated that very night. I frowned. San Antonio? He had told me he was meeting his partners in Dallas. A tiny bitter laugh escaped my lips. Julian hated driving to Dallas. San Antonio, though, held a gentler place in his heart. His mother had lived there before she passed, and he often spoke of that city with a wistful fondness. Yet that night's receipt showed a dinner for two, not a quiet remembrance. A bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, the same one he once bought for our 10th anniversary, stood like a cruel echo of love now gone. I tried to remember the last time Julian took me somewhere like that. It must have been a decade ago, when I opened my first bakery. The memory still lingered, soft candlelight, his proud smile, the gentle clink of glasses as he toasted my success. That moment had felt like forever. Now, it was nothing more than a lie printed on fading paper, a photograph in the scrapbook of deceit. I pulled out my phone and took careful pictures of both the email and the receipt. I didn't want to believe what my heart already knew. But a wife's intuition, especially after 40 years of marriage, is a deep, unshakable truth. Something dark was unfolding beneath the surface. My hands trembled, not only with anger but with a sinking dread I couldn't name. It felt as if I were standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down at the ruins of my life before they crumbled. I went to the garage, the air thick with gasoline and the faint perfume clinging to his clothes. His SUV was still warm. I opened the door, heart pounding, and shone my flashlight across the seats, searching for whatever might confirm my fears. There was nothing at first, only loose coins, a pen, and an empty bottle of water. Then my fingers brushed something smooth and cold inside the glove compartment. I pulled it out and froze. A used tube of lubricant, the cap crusted with residue. Proof so intimate and vulgar it made my stomach turn. I stood there, staring, my breath shallow and my mind racing. We hadn't been close in years. He'd said he was tired, that growing older had dulled his desire. Then what was this for? The question repeated in my head, heavy and merciless. I placed it back exactly where I found it, then scrubbed my hands with a napkin until they burned, as though I could wash away the betrayal that had seeped into my skin. I searched again, slower this time, each motion deliberate. Beneath the back seat, I found crumpled napkins drenched in perfume that wasn't mine. It was loud and sugary, the scent of someone younger, careless, bold enough to leave her mark behind. It reeked of infidelity in the quiet sanctuary that had once been ours. My throat tightened. I took photos of everything, the tube, the napkins, the seats, each image a record of pain I could not unsee. Then I shut the car door softly and went back inside. The weight of what I carried felt heavier than any flour sack I'd ever lifted. I sat at the kitchen table again, hands shaking, and reached for his phone, knowing already what I'd find or wouldn't. I scrolled through his messages. Only dry, formal work chats stared back, lifeless and cold. His inbox was nearly empty except for that one haunting email. I checked sent and drafts, hoping for a slip, a clue, but there was nothing. Too clean, too polished, too deliberate. Everything erased, as if he had mastered the art of lying. A master of lies, I thought bitterly. My rage was now a cold, hard stone in my chest, and a new, more dangerous emotion began to stir within me, a desire for truth, a need to expose the lie, no matter the cost. The next morning, when dawn crept through the curtains, I was already awake, sitting still in the dim light, feeling like a ghost haunting the walls of my own home. The image of the lubricant, the restaurant receipt, and that email spun endlessly in my head like a cruel carousel. I stood in the kitchen, hands busy but mind frantic, cracking eggs, buttering toast, pouring black coffee, his favorite. The smell filled the room, but I couldn't taste a thing. I hadn't slept. My thoughts were loud enough to drown the quiet. Julian appeared, moving slow, his hair disheveled, his eyes swollen from too little sleep or too much deceit. He sat down, took a sip of his coffee, and left it half full as always. "I have an important meeting today," he said in that practiced tone that used to sound responsible. "I'll be home late." He didn't meet my eyes. The words slid through the air like smoke. He was so good at this, I thought. The easy lies, the calm voice, the small rehearsed gestures. My blood felt cold. I forced a small smile and simply nodded, though inside I wanted to shout. "Where's the meeting? With whom? In San Antonio again?" Instead, I murmured softly, "All right, be careful," while the silence swallowed everything else. He rose, gave my shoulder a quick pat, more duty than affection, and walked out. The door closed, and the stillness returned. It was deafening. My suspicion was no longer a shadow. It was solid, heavy, real. I cleared the table slowly, washing each plate, each cup, one by one. The clink of porcelain was the only sound left in the house. I needed proof, not thoughts. I picked up my phone and scrolled through old contacts until I found Mrs. Miller's number. Years ago, when I opened my bakery, she had told me about a private investigator who specialized in infidelity. "Juliet, if you ever need it, I can give you Thomas's number," she'd said once, laughing. Back then, I couldn't imagine needing such a thing. Now I did. I hesitated before dialing, my hand trembling. Each ring on the line matched the pounding of my heart. When she answered, her voice carried both warmth and worry. "Hello, Mrs. Miller. Can you help me get in touch with Thomas? I need him." There was silence, a pause that stretched long and heavy. Then she spoke softly. "Juliet, did something happen? Did Julian hurt you?" I swallowed the answer, my throat dry with humiliation. "I just need to know the truth," I said quietly. "Can you help me?" Mrs. Miller didn't ask again. She only said she'd handle it. An hour later, a message appeared on my phone. "Mrs. Roberts, please don't worry. I will help you. Meet me at noon at the cafe on Main Street." It was short, but it steadied me, a thread of hope in a storm. At noon, I arrived at the cafe. It was small and old, the air thick with the scent of roasted beans and quiet conversation. Normally, I found that smell comforting. Today, it only deepened the ache in my chest. I chose a corner seat away from the light, a shadow among strangers, my back to the door, my hands clutching my purse tight enough to hurt. Thomas entered a few minutes later, a middle-aged man in a pale blue shirt, short and solid, with eyes that seemed to see through everything. He joined me with a simple nod. I handed him a flash drive containing the photos from the night before, the email, the receipt, the tube, the napkins. "This is all I have," I whispered. "I think my husband is cheating on me." The words tasted like ash. Thomas didn't flinch. He opened the files on his phone, studying each image with quiet focus. His face stayed unreadable, expressionless in that professional way people use when they've seen too much of other people's pain. But his silence said enough. He carefully made notes in a small notebook. "Mrs. Roberts, I understand. I'll start following Mr. Roberts this afternoon. Don't worry, I'll let you know as soon as possible." I stared at him, forcing back the tears that burned behind my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered, barely able to speak. "I just want to know the truth, no matter how much it hurts." Thomas nodded slowly, his expression softening with understanding. "I'll do my best," he said quietly. "Go home and act normal. Don't give him a reason to suspect." I left the cafe and walked through the busy street, surrounded by people but feeling utterly invisible. 40 years of marriage, all that faith and loyalty, now reduced to suspicion and fear. The foundation beneath me had cracked. Julian had always been the steady one, or so I thought. A man who valued family above all else. He was supposed to be my rock, my anchor in every storm. Yet now I was paying a stranger to follow him, to uncover his truth. The irony stung so sharply it almost made me laugh. I felt like a character in someone else's tragedy, trapped in a story I never chose to be in. That night, I stayed late at the bakery, surrounded by the warm scent of flour and yeast that had always comforted me. The soft hum of the ovens was steady, but my mind was chaos. I was sorting invoices when my phone buzzed against the counter. A message from Thomas. My pulse quickened, my heart hammering as I opened it. The air in the room seemed to vanish. The image on the screen stole my breath. Julian, wearing his favorite light blue shirt, was walking into a fancy restaurant. His hand was intertwined with a woman's. I zoomed in and felt my world collapse. Allison, my daughter-in-law. Her hair was loose, her lips painted dark red, her black dress clinging to her like sin. They weren't family in that moment. They were lovers. My hands trembled as I held the phone. "Allison, how could you?" At every family gathering, she and Julian had seemed almost cold toward one another, speaking only when necessary. I used to think it was tension. Now I saw it for what it was, an act. A performance so perfect it fooled me for years. More photos came, each one twisting the knife deeper. In one picture, they sat in a corner booth, surrounded by candlelight and flowers. Allison leaned in, smiling softly, and Julian lifted his glass to toast her, his gaze filled with warmth I hadn't seen in decades. That look, that tenderness, was once mine. In 40 years, he'd never looked at me like that, not even when our love was new. Seeing it now broke something inside me. I remembered being that young woman from San Diego with long hair and a hopeful smile, believing I was loved beyond measure. That look he once gave me now belonged to her. Near 2 a.m, my phone chimed again. Another message from Thomas. My stomach tightened as I opened the video. I put on my headphones and pressed play, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The footage was clear. Allison leaned close to Julian, whispering something that made him laugh loud and carefree, like a stranger's voice. Her laughter was light, her eyes shining beneath the glow of the restaurant lights. When they stood to leave, Julian opened the car door for her, smiling as if she were the center of his world. I watched it again and again, punishing myself with every replay. Every view was another cut to the soul. Allison, the girl I had welcomed into my home, the one I taught to make our family flan, now wrapped in deceit with the man I'd shared a lifetime with. And Julian, my partner, my husband, my everything, betraying not only me but our son. The questions flooded me. How long? How deep did their lies go? I could barely breathe. I saved all the photos and the video onto a flash drive, marking each file with time, date, and place. My body moved mechanically while my mind unraveled. I didn't want to accept it. I couldn't. Julian and Allison, together? It was too grotesque to be real, yet the evidence glared at me from the screen, cruel and undeniable. There was no escape from it now. I sat there in the bakery, the smell of pastries thick in the air, the trays lined with soft golden bread. They looked beautiful, but the taste of my world had turned bitter. I remembered the early years when Julian would help me carry sacks of flour, his laughter echoing in the tiny kitchen. Back then we were partners, dreamers, builders of something pure. Now it all felt like a story I had made up to comfort myself, a beautiful lie I had lived for too long. The next morning, I was in the small kitchen of the bakery, holding a list of orders for a large hotel downtown. The scent of vanilla and flour that once soothed me felt hollow, like comfort without warmth. I signed the delivery invoice, trying to focus, when my phone buzzed inside my apron pocket. My stomach tightened as I wiped my hands and checked the screen. A message from Thomas. "Mrs. Roberts, I'm sending you more evidence." That was all it said. I took a deep breath and opened it. My hands trembled. One image appeared, then another. The first showed Julian wearing his gray shirt, walking out of a law office near the main square. Beside him was Allison, her hair pulled into a high ponytail, dark glasses swallowing her face. They walked close, too close for in-laws. Their bodies leaned toward each other, casual, familiar, almost tender. In another photo, they stood before a 4-star hotel, its gold letters glinting in the sunlight. I zoomed in, desperate for something to prove it wasn't them. But it was. Their ease together cut through any illusion I had left. Then a short video arrived. I pressed play, my heart beating like a trapped bird. The footage was grainy, filmed from a distance, but clear enough to show them on a third-floor balcony. Julian's arm was around Allison's waist. Her head rested on his shoulder, her hair fluttering gently in the wind. Then, without hesitation, they kissed. Just a brief touch, but it was enough to burn away the last trace of denial inside me. I felt the ground disappear. I watched the video again, frame by frame, as though slower pain might hurt less. Allison reappeared through the curtains, running to Julian, her face glowing, radiant with joy, as if she were a young woman in love. I sank into my chair, gripping its edges to keep from collapsing. Mr. Thomas's next message came. They rented the room for the afternoon. I'll keep watching. I stared at the words, my throat closing as if a rope had tightened around it. Hours earlier, Julian had texted me. "Juliet, I won't be home tonight. I have to meet a potential partner from out of town. Rest well." The message had sounded gentle, familiar, loving, but now I saw it for what it was, a well-rehearsed lie. He wasn't out of town. He was in that hotel with our own daughter-in-law. I opened my portable drive and carefully saved each photo and video. Every click of the mouse felt like sealing a wound that refused to close. I stared at the screen, at his hand brushing her hair the same way he used to brush mine. 30 years ago, under the San Diego stars, he had promised me forever. Now, forever had turned into this. Memories flooded me, our dinners, our laughter, our family gathered around the table. Allison always kept her distance from Julian, sitting at the far end, her expression unreadable. Daniel once joked, "Mom, I think Allison can't stand Dad. She avoids him like the plague." I had laughed and agreed, never suspecting that every look, every silence had been part of their performance. Now I understood it all. The distance had been their disguise. Their act had fooled me completely, every gesture a careful lie. I sat there in the still bakery, the smell of sugar and flour thick in the air, realizing that my life had been nothing but a stage. Every smile, every family dinner, every word between us just another line in their carefully choreographed dance of deception. They acted too well in front of me, in front of Daniel, in front of the whole neighborhood. Every glance, every word, a carefully rehearsed play meant to blind me. I felt like a fool, a wife who'd chosen not to see, betrayed by two people who shared my table. The world outside went on as if nothing had happened, unaware that my life had been shattered on that hotel balcony. But Thomas had caught it all, every damning second. His camera, silent and precise, had frozen the truth I could no longer deny. I texted him back, "Thank you, please keep watching. I need to know everything." His reply came quick, "I will. Stay calm." That night, when I stepped back into the house I once called home, it no longer felt like mine. It reeked of ghosts and deception. I opened the dresser drawer with hands that no longer shook, only trembled from fury. From the printer, I gathered every image Julian and Allison leaving the law office, walking into the hotel, standing close on that balcony. I placed them in order, printed each frame from the video, and sealed it all in a thick envelope. I slid it beneath old family photos, burying the proof under a lifetime of lies. One picture caught my eye. The four of us at Daniel's birthday. Allison holding my son close, smiling sweetly. Julian with his hand on my shoulder, proud and protective. The perfect family. I stared at it until my vision blurred, my fingers itching to tear it apart. All I wanted was to erase those faces, to rip the false happiness out of my life for good. Before sunrise, I heard the front door creak open. Julian stumbled in, smelling of whiskey and stale perfume. "The partner was too difficult, Juliet," he muttered, voice thick, eyes red. I had to drink a lot. I stood in the kitchen holding a glass of water, watching him spin his excuses. "Rest," I said softly, the automatic calm of a practiced wife. "You have to work tomorrow." He nodded, gave my shoulder a hollow pat, and wandered off to bed. Within minutes, his snores filled the house, deep and careless, as though none of it had happened. My phone buzzed on the table. Thomas's name appeared. His voice when I answered was low and careful. "Mrs. Roberts, I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. They didn't notice a thing. I'm sending it now." My pulse thundered as the file came through. I put on my headphones, sat down, and pressed play. Allison's voice was the first thing I heard, sharp, greedy, dripping with cruelty. "Dad, finish that fake contract. I want that bakery chain now. I want that old hag gone." The words sliced through me. I clutched the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. Then Julian's voice followed, calm and steady, the man I thought I knew. "Don't worry about the papers. Juliet won't suspect anything. She trusts me too much." His confidence twisted the knife in my chest. They weren't only betraying my marriage, they were plotting to destroy my life's work, my bakery, every long night, every delivery, every crumb of effort. I thought of the endless mornings, the burns on my hands, the flour that dusted my hair like snow. Julian never lifted a single tray, never spent a sleepless night baking to fill an order. And now he and Allison wanted to take it all. The business, the home, everything I had built. They wanted to erase me from my own story as if I'd never existed. To kick me out of the house I had made a home. I almost broke down, but I still had the composure to copy the audio to the flash drive where I kept the other evidence. I wrote down the time and place carefully, the pen steadying me when my heart would not. The next morning, as I brewed coffee in the bakery, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Thomas. More photos, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. In the pictures, Julian and Allison sat together in his car. Between them lay a stack of papers. Allison, holding a red pen, leaned forward, marking each page with care. Julian watched her, smiling and nodding, the picture of agreement. Thomas wrote that he overheard them. They were talking about using a contact at the notary's office to transfer ownership. He promised to dig deeper. I zoomed in on the photo. I couldn't make out the words on the documents, but I didn't need to. My gut told me what they were. They were planning to take everything I had built, every dream I had ever chased. Around me, trays of fresh pastries filled the air with sweetness, but all I felt was the bitter taste of betrayal. The walls of my world were closing in. I reopened the audio file, put on my headphones, and forced myself to listen. Every cruel word echoed through my skull. That wretched old woman. That was what Allison called me. I remembered teaching her to cook, sharing recipes, hugging her as if she were my own daughter. I had trusted her. I believed she and Daniel would carry our family forward. How blind I had been. And Julian, the man I'd loved since girlhood in San Diego, the man who once swore to stand beside me forever. Together they had mocked everything sacred in my life. My faith in love, in loyalty, in family, all of it twisted into their private joke. The bakery door opened, and Mrs. Peterson, a loyal customer, walked in smiling, holding her purse close. "Juliet, your bakery has been packed lately. The chain is growing fast. I'm so proud of you," she said warmly. I managed a small smile, replying softly, "Thank you. I'm doing my best." But inside, I was hollow. I wondered what she would think if she knew the truth. Would she see me as strong, or as a fool blinded by love and betrayal? I handed her pastries and watched her leave. When the door closed, I slumped into my chair, my hands gripping my head. No tears came, only a quiet rage that burned hotter than grief. It sat in my chest like fire in an oven, ready to erupt. That evening, we ate dinner in silence. The yellow light flickered across Julian's face, distorting it, making him look like a stranger wearing my husband's skin. He spoke casually, chewing between words, as if the world weren't collapsing around us. "Juliet, I have some important contracts to sign this week. Maybe you can look at them for me. They're complicated." I lifted a piece of bread, pretending to eat, but in my mind, I could hear Allison's voice again. "Dad, hurry up and sign the fake contracts." He was testing me, seeing how much I knew. I gave him a tired smile, the mask of a wife too weary to fight, and murmured, "Yes, I'll look later. I'm tired tonight." He nodded, drank his wine, and smiled, pretending everything was fine. But I saw what hid beneath that calm greed, betrayal, hunger, the look of a man about to devour his prey. He poured another glass, then another. His cheeks flushed, his words slurred as he rambled about a difficult client. I nodded, silent, my mind screaming. Did he think I was that naive? When he finally stumbled to bed, he dropped his keys on the nightstand. They glimmered faintly under the lamp, calling to me. My pulse quickened. My chance had come. I stood by the doorway for a moment, staring at those keys. My heart beat so fast it hurt. The air felt heavy, charged. Slowly I stepped forward, quiet as a shadow, careful not to wake him. Each movement carried both pain and purpose, as if I were walking between two lives, the one I had lost and the one I was about to claim. I grabbed the keys, squeezed them tight, and went straight to the garage. The night was silent, heavy, as if even the wind refused to move. Only the faint sound of crickets broke through the stillness, their rhythm matching the pulse of my anger. I turned on my phone's flashlight, the beam falling across Julian's old SUV, now a monument to betrayal. I opened the door slowly. The familiar scent of gasoline mixed with a sweet, foreign perfume hit me immediately. I leaned closer, opened the glove compartment, and there it was, the same tube of lubricant, cap loose, residue dry along the edge. I stared at it for a long moment, disgusted. It wasn't just an object anymore. It was proof, a symbol of everything rotten hiding beneath the surface of my life. They had used it again. That much was clear. My stomach twisted as I realized how easily they had continued their little game, their shameless routine. I carried the tube to the kitchen, set it on the counter, and scrubbed my hands with lemon soap until my skin burned. The bright citrus scent filled the air, sharp and cleansing, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. I opened the tool drawer and took out a tube of clear industrial superglue, the same kind I once used to fix broken chairs at the bakery. It was ordinary, harmless in another world. Tonight, it was something else, a weapon. I unscrewed the lubricant cap, my movements steady, precise, and filled it slowly with glue, drop after drop, until it brimmed to the top. I wiped the edge clean, shook it lightly, and tested it. The liquid came out smooth, identical to the real thing. To the eye, no difference at all. A soft smile tugged at my lips, not of joy but of quiet defiance. This was not madness. This was balance being restored. I placed the tube back exactly as I had found it, adjusted the seat, and checked the floor mat. Everything looked untouched. Before leaving, I lifted the trunk lid. The beam of light revealed a mess of crumpled paper bags, an empty bottle, and in the corner, an unopened condom. My heart lurched, but I no longer had tears left to shed. I took photos carefully, adding them to my growing collection of evidence. Every click of the camera was another nail sealing their coffin of deceit. Back inside, I returned the keys to their spot beside Julian's alarm clock. Then I sat on the living room sofa, an old book open in my lap, pretending to read. The lamplight fell over the pages, but the words swam before my eyes. My thoughts spun endlessly. Daniel, my son, still blissfully unaware that the two people closest to him were destroying his world. How could I tell him? How could I destroy his peace to reveal this nightmare? I thought of the bakery, of the years I had fought for it, the nights without sleep, the arguments with Julian about every expense. I had believed he cared. I had believed he wanted me to succeed. But now I saw the truth. He had only been waiting, patient, cunning, ready to strike when I was weakest. An hour passed before Julian stirred and stumbled into the kitchen. He reached for a glass of water, his eyes half open. "Still not sleeping, Juliet?" he mumbled. I forced a calm smile and said softly, "No, just reading a little. Finish your drink and go back to bed." He nodded, drank, and disappeared into the bedroom, his snoring starting almost instantly. I sat there, motionless, watching the dark hallway. That man, who had once sworn to stand beside me until the end, now slept peacefully under the same roof he had poisoned. The house was quiet again, but I could feel the shift inside me. Something in me had hardened, sharpened. The woman he betrayed no longer existed. Only the one who would make him pay remained. But he didn't know that I had already started my counterattack. At dawn, I rose before the world awoke. Pale light crept through the bakery window, soft and uncertain. My hands pressed into the dough, kneading with strength I didn't know I still had. Each movement carried the weight of fury and betrayal. By the time I returned home for breakfast, my face was calm, my voice steady. Julian was already up, sipping his black coffee, pretending life was ordinary. I placed his plate eggs and toast in front of him. "Julian," I said softly, "I have to travel to Nashville tomorrow to finalize a deal with a new partner. I'll be home late. Can you handle dinner?" I spoke casually, watching him from the corner of my eye, measuring every flicker of his reaction. He looked startled at first, then something shifted behind his eyes, relief, not worry. "A big contract?" he asked, reaching for my hand with practiced tenderness. "Go ahead. I'll take care of everything." That gleam in his eyes felt like a blade against my chest. He wanted me gone. I knew it. I smiled faintly, whispering thanks, and took a sip of coffee to hide my trembling lips. I told him I'd call if I returned late. He nodded, muttering about needing to get to the office early. As he left, I noticed his phone resting on the table. The screen lit up. A missed call. The name glowed like Poison Allison Thomas. My heart clenched. Before I could touch it, Julian came back, grabbed it quickly, and turned it off with a strained smile. "Forgot it," he murmured, and walked out. I stared at the closed door, numb with disbelief. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. That day, I moved through my work like a machine baking, delivering, smiling at customers, but my mind stayed fixed on Julian and Allison. I couldn't let their deception continue. I needed undeniable proof, their own voices confessing in the dark, where they thought no one could hear. That night, I pretended exhaustion. I told Julian I had to sleep early for the trip. He nodded, giving me a pat on the shoulder. "Rest well, Juliet. Be careful tomorrow." I lay still, my breathing even, though my heart pounded beneath the sheets. Around midnight, his snoring stopped. Then came the sound of feet on the floor, cautious, deliberate. A dim light from his phone flickered in the hallway. I stayed motionless until I heard the bedroom door close behind him. Then I rose quietly and followed. From behind the living room curtain, I watched him standing near the window, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and eager. "Yes, of course. Come over tomorrow. We won't need the hotel anymore. Juliet's leaving town for business." A soft laugh drifted through the line Allison's unmistakable voice, sweet and smug. "That's great, Dad. Finally, we can relax." Julian chuckled. "Come early. I'll be waiting." My blood boiled, my nails digging into my palms as I stood frozen behind the curtain. They weren't only unfaithful, they were turning my home into their secret nest. I slipped back into the bedroom, every step careful. From the drawer, I took Daniel's old recorder, the one I'd bought him for college lectures. I replaced the batteries and switched it to continuous record. Then I hid it behind the bookshelf near the headboard, the red light small but steady. I covered it with a framed family photo, the four of us smiling at Daniel and Allison's wedding. For a long moment, I stared at the picture, remembering the joy of that day, the laughter, the toasts, the promises. Now the faces in that frame felt foreign, cruel. I adjusted it carefully, making sure nothing looked out of place. The recorder was ready. The photo stood where it always had, and I tasted the bitterness of betrayal thick as ash on my tongue. Allison's smile, Julian's hug. Now, they were all lies. Before lying down again, I checked the recorder once more, making sure it was running. I adjusted the photo frame carefully to hide the cable, then slipped under the covers, feigning sleep. Julian returned moments later, collapsing onto the bed and drifting into snores, as if the world outside his deceit no longer existed. My eyes stayed wide open in the darkness. I reached for the clock, set the alarm for earlier than usual, and closed my eyes not to rest but to wait. When it rang at 5, the world was still cloaked in night. Only the streetlights cast faint halos through the windows. The house was silent except for Julian's rhythmic snoring. In the kitchen, I stood with a cup of cold coffee, staring at the skillet of oil glistening on the stove. This was it, the last step of my plan. Simple but effective. I tied a thin string to the stove's igniter, ran it along the counter, and secured the other end to a heavy coffee tin by the window. One pull would ignite the flame from afar. The rising smoke would be thick, dark, and impossible to ignore. I cracked the window open slightly and gave the setup a quick test. The flame flared, the oil smoked instantly, spirals curling upward like a dark signal. I turned it off fast, cleaned every trace, and checked twice that nothing looked suspicious. Then I slipped on my jacket, grabbed my large purse, and prepared to leave. Before stepping out, I went to the bedroom and shook Julian's shoulder lightly. "I have to get to the station," I whispered. "I'll be home late." He opened his eyes, groggy but unconcerned. "Be careful, Juliet. Call me if you need anything," he muttered before burying his face in the pillow. I looked at him one last time, the man who had once been my whole world, now unaware of the trap waiting for him. I turned and left, my heart heavy but my steps steady. Instead of heading to the station, I crossed the street. Mrs. Peterson opened her door with concern when she saw me standing there so early. "Juliet, what's going on? You look pale," she said softly. I forced a faint smile. "Mrs. Peterson, could I stay here for a few hours? I need to keep an eye on something at my house." She hesitated only a moment, then nodded, ushering me in with quiet understanding and offering a warm cup of coffee. From her front window, I could see my own front porch perfectly. I sat there, hands wrapped around the mug, my pulse unsteady. Hours passed. Around 10, a taxi pulled up. Allison stepped out wearing a light floral dress and large sunglasses that barely hid her face. Julian opened the door, scanning the street before quickly guiding her inside. I gripped my cup tighter. "It's time," I murmured. I opened the app on my phone that connected to the recorder hidden in our bedroom. The audio streamed through my headphones, Allison's laughter, the soft clink of glasses, their footsteps moving across the floor. Then Julian's deep voice came, relaxed and confident. "We don't have to hide anymore," Allison giggled. "You really pick your moments, don't you? The old hag's gone, right?" I bit my lips so hard I could taste blood. The words seared my mind. The mattress began to creak, their movements filling my ears until I could no longer bear it. I closed my eyes, whispered to myself, "Just a little longer, Juliet, just a little longer." Then came Allison's scream, sharp and terrified. "What the hell is this? We're stuck." Julian's angry voice followed. "Quiet. Let me see." That was my cue. I tapped the screen lightly, activating the smoke trap. The string jerked tight, the igniter sparked, and the oil caught fire. Within seconds, thick black smoke poured out the kitchen window, coiling upward into the morning air like a dark warning. "Mrs. Peterson gasped beside me, eyes wide, clutching my arm as the first curls of smoke filled the sky. "Juliet, your house is on fire." I kept my face calm, though inside I felt a strange, steady quiet. Neighbors poured into the street, their voices rising into the morning. Someone shouted for help. The panic spread like a tide. A man down the block, Mr. Miller, pulled out his phone without hesitation and called the city fire department. I stayed there, holding my coffee cup tightly, my eyes fixed on my house. The scene unfolded in slow motion through the glass. In my headphones, Allison's voice climbed into panic while Julian barked orders I knew were useless. They fought and flailed, but I had planned for this. I listened, each sound confirming what I already believed. But I knew they couldn't do anything. The industrial superglue I had swapped was already at work, leaving them trapped at their most humiliating moment. I pictured them struggling, faces torn by fear and pain. Part of me felt a hard satisfaction, cold and terrible, because they had crossed every line. They tried to take my life, my work, my name. Now they were stuck, exposed in the worst possible way. The smoke continued to rise, getting thicker. The neighbors were crowding together, yelling in a panic. Voices overlapped as people tried to make sense of the smoke and shouts. Someone asked where I was, someone else guessed I was out of town on business. Mrs. Peterson stood beside me, eyes searching mine for an answer I did not offer. She only squeezed my hand and watched the scene unfold. She just squeezed my hand gently. I knew she had a hunch, but I didn't need to give her an explanation. The truth was closing in like a storm. 10 minutes later, a fire truck's siren split the air, urgent and terrible. The engine tore down the street and stopped in front of my house. I watched Daniel leap from the cab, dressed in his uniform, his face hard and stricken. I stayed still, letting everything take its course. My son shouted in a firm voice, "Get the equipment ready quick. There might be people inside." He moved like a man trained to act without hesitation, authority rolling off him even as his face went pale. Seeing him there, in command and confused, stabbed me. He had always been proud of us, proud of his family. Now he was about to witness a truth that would break him. I stayed still, letting everything take its course. The smoke from the kitchen continued to rise thickly, making Daniel and his team believe there was a serious fire. He led the entry, swinging a sledge to break down the front door with practiced force. Splinters flew as wood gave way. His crew surged in with hoses and gear, the quick choreography of rescue filling the house with noise. I listened to every step, every shouted instruction, the commotion coming from the bedroom. Julian's desperate shouts mixed with Allison's sobs. I heard them rage and plead in the cramped room. "Do something, Julian, I can't move." "Shut up, don't scream," he hissed. The sound of their panic cut through me as clearly as glass breaking. I held the phone to my ear, the hidden mic broadcasting their humiliation in real time. They were trapped, helpless, just as I had calculated. Daniel entered the bedroom, and I could imagine what he found. His own father and his wife, naked, stuck to each other on the bed, their faces pale with pain and panic. I was not in the room, but through the headset I heard Daniel's voice break. "What is this?" A firefighter behind him breathed. "Oh my God," the stunned sound of a professional confronted with the grotesque. Someone tried to laugh, then swallowed it, as the horror settled in. I knew that cry wasn't just to maintain order, but my son's last attempt to hide his pain. The humiliation was now exposed, not just to Daniel, but to the entire fire team and the whole neighborhood. One firefighter ran out, calling to Daniel that the smoke was under control and the blaze was a small oil fire. Yet Daniel did not answer. He stood frozen with the weight of what he had seen. I imagined him inside, faced with the betrayal. I figured the young man was still in the bedroom, frozen by what he was seeing. The neighbors started to arrive, crowding in front of the door, pointing and whispering. Voices volleyed questions and shocked exclamations as people peered in. "It's Julian and his daughter-in-law," someone cried, followed by gasps and murmurs of disgust. Mrs. Peterson, beside me, took out her phone without a word, raising it to record the scene. She focused her camera on the bed where they writhed, their faces twisted with pain. She looked at me with eyes full of pity and anger. In that look I saw the judgment I had already accepted. She mouthed words I could not hear, a mix of sorrow and accusation. I kept my gaze on the window, refusing to give her more than a small nod. Daniel emerged from the house with slumped shoulders, boots thudding on the floor. Through the headset, Julian yelled a hoarse command to his son, "Get everyone out of here. Close the door, Daniel." But it was too late. The entire block had gathered, a crowd pressing in with faces that held contempt and wounded sympathy. The whispers turned to judgment, as if the scandal had been thrown up for public consumption. Father-in-law and daughter-in-law caught in the act, someone said, disbelief in their voice. "Unbelievable," murmured a neighbor. "Poor Juliet, how did it come to this?" And the chorus of shame swelled around us. The firefighters hesitated for a moment, then duty took over. They wrapped sheets around Julian and Allison, trying to cover their bare bodies that were still stuck together. I could hear Allison's trembling sobs, her voice cracking with pain. "Please, do something," she cried. "I can't stand it anymore." Julian's reply came weak and low. "Don't let anyone see us." But the whole neighborhood had already seen. Whispers turned into gasps, gasps into bitter laughter, eyes narrowed in disgust, mouths twisted in pity. They were carried out under a thin sheet, the stretchers surrounded by murmurs and shaking heads. People muttered words like disgrace and shame, voices cutting through the morning air. When the ambulance pulled away with its siren blaring, the crowd stayed, buzzing with cruel fascination. Among the loud voices, I heard bursts of laughter. "What a show!" shouted Mr. Miller, his tone laced with mockery. "I can't believe two people could be this shameless." An older woman, her voice trembling with sympathy, whispered to her friend, "Poor Juliet." I stayed among them, feigning shock, pretending I had just returned from the bus station after hearing about the fire. My hands trembled just enough to make it look real. Daniel stood motionless in the yard, his arms limp, his face ghostly white. His fellow firefighters avoided his eyes, silently collecting their gear. The weight of what he'd seen pressed down on everyone. I knew Daniel wasn't only stunned by the sight of his father and his wife trapped together. He was broken by betrayal, crushed between the two people he had trusted most. I wanted to hold him, to tell him I was sorry he had to bear this truth, but instead, I turned away, walking quietly beside Mrs. Peterson. She led me to the hospital without saying a word. We sat together in a dim hallway on the 3rd floor, the air heavy with the smell of antiseptic. I kept the expression of a wife who had just been told her house was on fire, my hands folded neatly on my lap. Hours passed before a doctor appeared, his forehead glistening with sweat. He stopped in front of me, his voice soft. "Mrs. Roberts, we managed to separate them. Fortunately, there's no lasting damage, just mild burns. They'll need ointment for the skin." I nodded, pretending relief while my fingers brushed the edge of my purse, feeling the 2 tubes I had hidden there. "Thank you, doctor," I said, my tone trembling just enough to mask intent. "May I see them?" He nodded and walked me to the nurse's counter. The nurse, young and kind-faced, handed me 2 small tubes with a look of pity. I thanked her and waited for her to turn away. When she did, I slipped the tubes of ointment into my bag and replaced them with the mustard I had prepared earlier. My movements were smooth, deliberate, almost practiced. I walked toward the hospital room holding the mustard, my face carefully arranged in concern. "Julian, Allison, are you all right?" I asked gently. Allison lay on the bed, her hair tangled, her eyes red and swollen, unable to meet my gaze. Julian mumbled, his voice hoarse. "Juliet, I can explain." I didn't let him finish. I placed the tube on the table beside the bed and turned away. My footsteps echoed softly down the hallway. Minutes later, a scream tore through the silence. Allison's voice filled the air, raw with agony. "It burns. My skin is on fire." Julian shouted, thrashing on the bed. "What the hell is this? Who did this?" Doors opened. Patients peeked out. Nurses rushed toward the noise. The hallway erupted in chaos. A woman whispered to her son, "It's them, the couple from the video this morning. The father-in-law and the daughter-in-law." Another voice followed, colder. "They deserve it." The doctor ran in with nurses, barking orders to rinse their skin and apply neutralizers. But the damage was already done. The humiliation had gone public, unstoppable, carried on whispers and screens. Their downfall was complete. Mrs. R.N.L. Peterson's video of the stretcher had already gone viral across the neighborhood and online. I stood in the corridor, listening to the murmurs around me. Their disgrace was now the world's spectacle, each comment a fresh cut to their pride. When the commotion settled, Daniel appeared at the end of the hallway, moving slowly, a thick folder in his hands. I had called him earlier, asking him to retrieve the envelope of evidence from the drawer and the divorce papers I had prepared. He handed them to me without speaking, his eyes hollow. I opened the folder, the weight of everything pressing on my chest. Without a word, I took out the documents, the proof of betrayal, and the papers that would end it all, and placed them on the table in front of Julian and Allison. I looked straight into his eyes, my tone cold but steady. 40 years of marriage end here. Sign these papers and then disappear from my life, from my son's life, forever. Allison crumbled, her tears flowing as she turned toward Daniel. "Honey, forgive me," she pleaded. "I made a mistake. Please, I beg you." But Daniel didn't speak. His eyes were like stone, empty, and he walked away without a word. Julian reached for my hand, his voice shaking. "Juliet, listen to me. I didn't want this." I pulled my hand back sharply, cutting him off. "Don't say another word, Julian. You chose your path long ago," he shouted desperately. "Juliet, please." But a nurse entered, her voice firm. "Be quiet, this is a hospital." I turned and walked out without looking back, leaving his voice to fade behind me. In the hallway, Daniel was leaning against the wall, his head bowed between his hands. I went to him, placed my palm gently on his shoulder. He didn't look up. "Mom," he whispered, his voice raw. "Why did it have to be Dad? Why her?" I couldn't answer. I only wrapped my arms around him, feeling the weight of our grief mingling together. Our family was gone, shattered beyond repair. In that moment, I knew Julian and Allison had lost everything, their pride, their marriage, their filthy scheme. But Daniel and I had also lost a piece of ourselves. I hoped that time would bring healing, even if it never brought full peace. Weeks later, my bakery was full again. The bell above the door rang non-stop, laughter and chatter replacing silence. Customers came in with smiles and warm words. "Juliet, you're incredible," Mrs. Peterson said, her hand clutching a paper bag filled with flan. "The whole neighborhood admires your strength, the way you stood your ground and protected your business." I smiled and thanked her. People called me strong, but only I knew that strength had been born from pain, forged in betrayal. I looked at the old oven where I had poured 4 decades of sweat and tears. Every time I touched its handle, memories came back. Julian's empty promises, Allison's false affection. They wanted to destroy everything I had built, but they failed. I was still standing, with my bakery, my son, and a new beginning. After that day, Daniel moved back home. He didn't say much, but I could see the change. The light in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by something deeper, quieter. "Mom, I want to stay here for a while," he said one evening, walking in with a small suitcase. "I'll help with the bakery, handle the clients, whatever you need." I hugged him tightly, feeling the familiar warmth of the boy I had raised. I didn't ask questions. I knew he needed time, just as I did. Together, we opened the bakery every morning, side by side. I prepared the dough and arranged the trays. Daniel checked invoices, answered calls, and spoke to restaurants. "Mom, the Grand Hotel wants to increase their pastry order for next week," he called out one day. His tone was calm, steady, but missing its old spark. "All right," I said softly, "confirm it." "I'll make extra dough." These small exchanges, these quiet mornings brought a fragile peace to both of us. There were no more fake smiles from Julian, no more soft, deceiving words from Allison, just Daniel and me, tending to what remained. Dinner was simple now, just the two of us at the kitchen table. Sometimes rice and beans with chicken, sometimes just bread and coffee. One night, Daniel looked up with a faint smile. "Mom, could you make flan this weekend?" It was the first smile I'd seen in weeks. "All right," I replied, relieved, "but you have to help me stir the caramel." He nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting just a little. And in that moment, under the soft kitchen light, I felt it, the slow, quiet return of life. We were healing, piece by fragile piece, surrounded by the scent of warm bread and new beginnings. I started making time for myself, something I had almost forgotten how to do in 40 years. I joined a cooking club at the community center where women my age shared recipes and laughter. "Juliet, you make the best flan in the neighborhood," one of them said with a grin as she reached for a piece. I smiled and replied, It is just a little trick I picked up back in San Diego. I also began attending church on weekends. I would sit quietly beneath the colored light streaming through the stained glass and whisper prayers, not for Julian or Allison, but for Daniel and for myself, that we might find the strength to keep going. Some afternoons I strolled through the town square with Mrs. Peterson, listening to her cheerful chatter about the latest neighborhood gossip. "You know, Juliet," she would say, her voice sparkling, "everyone still talks about Julian and Allison, but they say you are the one who won." I would smile faintly without answering. Perhaps I did win, I would think. But the cost was everything I once called family. Over time, Daniel began to open up again. He spoke more, sharing stories from his work as a firefighter, his eyes bright with purpose once more. "We handled a big fire at the market yesterday," he told me one evening over dinner. "It was dangerous, but no one was hurt." I listened with pride swelling in my chest. "Please be careful," I said softly. "You are all I have left." Daniel reached across the table, his voice gentle. "Don't worry, Mom. I will never leave you alone." His words healed something inside me that had long been broken. They reminded me that even after losing so much, I still had what mattered most. One afternoon, while the bakery buzzed with customers, I sat at the register watching the street outside. The bell above the door rang endlessly, and the scent of sweet bread filled the air. I looked at the trays of flan and pastries, thinking of the road I had traveled to reach this peace. I had built this bakery from scratch, from a hopeful girl in San Diego to a woman who had weathered storms and betrayal. Julian and Allison had tried to take everything, but they failed. I still had my bakery. I still had Daniel, and most of all, I still had myself. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let us meet in the comments. If this story touched you, you can support me with a super thanks so I can continue sharing more stories like this. Thank you sincerely for your kindness and encouragement. I cannot wait to read your thoughts below. On the screen, you will find 2 new life stories I recommend for you. There is so much more waiting for you. Do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.